Alright, welcome to episode 3 of customizing the FPS template in Roblox, and in today's episode we're going to be customizing the reticle. Now, before we get started, I just want to thank everyone that's been showing support to the channel. You guys are really killing it. Surprises me every day. We're almost to 50 subs, so let's keep on grinding. Now, jumping straight in, let's press play, and you can see that Roblox already has a built-in reticle, built-in crosshair, whatever you want to call it. And it's very basic, very default. Gets the job done, but I find that it breaks the immersion a little bit. So when I play the template, my eyes seem to always directly go to this crosshair, which I really don't want the player to do. I want them to subconsciously think or know that the crosshair is there. Just like in other FPSs, if you've played a lot of FPSs, you'll notice that they have crosshairs, but you're not actively looking at it. Like you know it's there subconsciously or in your peripheral. Um, but it's very subtle. So that's what we're gonna be trying to go for. I'm gonna do my best to recreate that. Also, you'll notice that we don't have anything in the starter GUI, right? So if we go into the players, we find our player, and we go into the player GUI, you will see that we have all these GUIs inside the player GUI. So what that is telling me that everything is being parented here and not being set up in the starter GUI. So keeping that in mind, I know like where everything is and how everything works. Hopefully that makes sense. So if we go into the replicated storage, into the blaster, and we find our scripts folder, and we go into our GUI controller, you will find that it has the reticle GUI and the blaster GUI. So that's where that is. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to duplicate the reticle GUI. I tend to always try to keep the original. Just in case I mess up somewhere along the way, I always have the original that I could fall back on. But we're going to take our copy and we're actually going to put it in starter GUI just to just so we can see it and customize it. So now we can go to our reticle GUI and we can go into our frames here. You can see that it shows some sizes, 15 by 2, and this is where we're going to change everything. So go into the properties and let's go into the size. I'm thinking that we just cut everything in half when it comes to the size. So we'll just make this 7 just for simplicity, and we'll see how that looks. Yeah, I like how that looks. That looks a lot better, a lot more subtle compared to the other ones. So I'm just gonna see how it all looks together. So let's just go through and just cut everything in half here. Size 7, 1, 1, 7. Yeah, that looks a lot better. Get it to how you want. It's your game, so you make it however you want. But if you want to change the color, very simple. We'll just grab all these and we'll just find background color 3, and we can just change the color to whatever we want, and then we can see how that looks. Yeah, so very simple to change the colors, but I think I'm just gonna stick with white. And then maybe make it a little bit darker. You see how that looks. Yeah, that looks a lot better in my opinion. And then we can grab all these again, and then we can just make it a little bit transparent. Just a little bit more subtle. Perfect. And that's basically it for customizing it. Actually, let's go into the reticle here, and then we'll um we'll add a UI scale. because if we go into the hit marker, you can see that it has a UI scale, and I'll explain a little bit further in the inside the code there. Yeah, this is basically ready to go. We could take this one, the original one, and we could put it in our server storage because I don't think anything calls the server storage, but just in case, we'll rename it, and we'll just call this OG for original. And then we can take our custom one and put it inside the GUI controller. And we can press play and see how that looks. Yeah, that looks a lot better already. Yeah, we can start scripting now. So let's get to that. Let's kind of clean this up a little bit. Now, it makes sense that where we're going to be working is the GUI controller because that's where our reticle is. So let's go into it. And if you kind of just do like a quick read, you see, okay, reticle template is calling the reticle GUI. And then we can find the reticle template. Here we go, reticle GUI. And it's making a clone and it's parenting it to the player GUI. And then it's inside the self for it to be called anywhere. And then you can see that the hit marker is being tweened. And then we come down here, we can see the function show hit marker. And then this is being called inside, I think, Blaster Controller, if I'm not mistaken. And yeah, that's basically kind of under the hood. And we're going to be kind of using the same method um, a little bit. We're going to have a lot more moving parts than just hitting like a humanoid. So, okay, so here is the theory. When the player shoots, it should tween out, right? It should take the frames of the reticle and move out. And then it's got to, when the player stops shooting, it's also going to come back, right? Also, if the I'm thinking when the player walks, it should push the reticle out as well. And then if the player walks and shoots, it should push out even further. So we're gonna have a lot more moving parts here. So we're gonna need a couple flags, and flags are very useful. Um, Basically, true false booleans here, and so basically, like we're telling the script, okay, if this is happening, do this. If not, then this, right? So that's why flags are very useful. So we could say inside the self, we could say shooting equals false, just a simple flag, and then we could say walking equals false. Perfect. Um, I'm also thinking we're gonna need to store the original positions of the frames, so we have something for the tween to come back to. So I'm just gonna say, what should I name it? OG reticle pause equals, and then we'll store it inside a table. I think that's gonna be the easiest way. And just like in the last episode when we put in the aim system, where we had a couple functions of start aiming, stop aiming, we're gonna kind of the um, same concept. So we're gonna have is shooting, stop shooting, is walking, not walking, that kind of thing. So we're gonna say function GUI controller, and I think what we'll do is just copy this, and then we can come down here. Oops, there we go. Make a couple of these. Stop, start, stop, start. And then we can come over here and say is shooting not shooting is walking not walking. And then we can say self shooting equals true. Then we can say self dot shooting equals false. Self dot walking equals true. I can hit the space button, that'd be great. Self dot walking equals false. Now we're going to be coming back to these functions here in a second, but for right now they're good. Let's make some space. Kind of want to keep everything kind of chunked here. We're going to need another function, and we'll say reticle tween. Okay, so a couple things. Let's call the reticle. We'll say local reticle equals self dot reticle GUI dot reticle, and now we need to make two functions for tweening out and then tweening in. So we'll say local tween out equals tween info dot new. Now, if you look up here, we're going to need a number, just time in seconds, style, and a direction. So I think for tweening out, I kind of want it to be a little bit slower, kind of to give like a build up effect. What I'm thinking is not quite half a second. Actually, let's try half a second, and then we could say enum dot using style dot quad enum dot using direction dot out, and then we can say local tween in equals tween info dot new. Now, for coming back in, we kind of wanted to be a little bit faster, a little bit more snappy. So I'm going to say 0.1. And then, just like above, we'll say using style dot quad, and then enum dot using direction dot in. So there's our out and in. We got a little bit of a build up, and then we have a snappy coming back. Make some space. Now, what we're going to do is if we go into the reticle, they're all named the same thing. Now, you could set it up and name each one of these frames like top, bottom, left, right. But I think for simplicity, I'm just going to loop through everything inside the reticle and then get their position and then store it inside this table. So we're going to use if next. So this is going to iterate through the table. We'll say self dot og reticle. Should have picked a better name. Equals nil. Then, and then now we can loop through. We'll call this frame, and then in pairs. And then we're going to want to loop through reticle. and then get all the children. And then we're going to say if frame is a frame, then we'll say self.og reticle frame, equals frame dot position. Perfect. That should go through the table, get these positions, and then store it inside the table. Now, we're going to need some expansion multipliers for the spacing. So we're going to need a walking, a shooting, a combination for walking and shooting, and then a default. So we'll say local walk expansion equals, we'll say 1.5. And then we can say local shoot expansion equals 2. Local, let's say combo expansion equals 3. And then we'll say local default expansion equals 0. So then it goes back to the original position. And now we could say if self.shooting and self.walking, then we could say default expansion equals combo expansion. And then we can say else if self.shooting, then default expansion equals shoot expansion. Then we can say else if self.walking, then default equals walk. And that should do it. Now we can come down here and kind of get the different states between the different states of what the player is doing. So we have to kind of loop through again. Frame in pairs, and then we call our reticle get children do, and then if frame is a frame, we can say local original position equals self.og reticle position. Plug in our frame. We are going to need a direction. And direction is going to be a vector2.new. And we're going to need the original pause x scale, and we'll minus that by 0.5. And then we're going to need our y scale minus negative 0.5. Now we're going to need our offset, and that's going to be a udm2.new. Then that's going to be our original pause.x dot scale. Then we're going to plus direction dot x, and then we multiply that by our default expansion. And then we're going to need our y dot y, and then we'll plus direction dot y, and then we'll multiply that by our default expansion. And that should do it. Okay, so now we're going to need the actual logic. So we're going to say if default expansion is greater than 0, then we can say local move out equals tween service create. We're going to need our frame. We're going to need our tween out. And then make some brackets. And then we're going to say position equals offset. And then we could say move out colon play. And then down here we can say else local move in equals tween service colon create. We're gonna need our frame, tween in, brackets, and then we're gonna say position equals original pause. And then we can say move in colon play. And that should be it. Now we can come down here and basically we can call this this function in all of these. So what we can do is I just copy everything. And then we can say self there we go. Sometimes my keyboard does not like to listen. And just put all these in. All right, that should be it. Now we need to kind of tie everything together and call these functions in the Blaster controller. So we'll open up our Blaster controller module. We don't need to put anything in here. We need to go to not shoot, but start shooting. And we'll come right down here. And then we could say self dot GUI controller, and then call our function, which I believe is called is shooting. Let me just double check. Is shooting. Okay. And then we can come to our shooting.false here. Right below that, we can say self.GUI controller. And what did we call it? Not shooting. Not shooting. And then we can come down here and basically say the same thing. Not shooting. Okay, so before we add walking, we're just going to test this out, make sure everything works. Okay, let's see. Yeah, that doesn't really make any sense, does it? Wow, I can't believe we missed that. Okay, so take all this out. So it's self colon reticle tween. All right. Okay, let's see what's wrong with this. Ah, figured it out. I forgot. Scale. Always good to double check everything. Knew it was very simple. And look at that. Every time we shoot, it tweens. And if we hold it, it kind of builds up, as you can see. I think a half a second's pretty good. We'll keep that. All right, now we could set up walking. So we're gonna go back to the blaster controller. Um, and we'll come down here. We find equip. Um, because this is calling the humanoid here, and it's finding humanoid. Now we gotta be careful when we use while true do. I'm gonna use it, um, but it can be very taxing. But being that we're only using it a couple times, we make sure that we're not using it anywhere else in this. Yeah, so it should be fine. So we'll come down here, and then we can say while true do. We're gonna want to add a weight. We'll add a 0.5 for now. We'll turn it down just to see how it looks, and then we'll add a check. We'll say if not self humanoid or not self humanoid dot parent. Then um, we'll say continue. Then we're gonna need so the we are gonna get the move direction of the player. So we need a couple variables for that. We'll say move direction equals self dot humanoid dot move direction, and then we'll say local is walking equals move direction dot magnitude greater than 0. Then we'll come down here. We'll say if is walking. Then we'll add a print. We'll say is walking. And then we can add an else here. We'll add another print. We'll say not walking. Let's test this. Okay, so not walking is walking. Perfect. So we got those. We could take these out. Hmm. Um, we could say self.GUI controller. And then we can call our is walking. And then we can come down here and say self GUI controller. Then we can say not walking. And that should do it, hopefully. All right, let's see. Perfect. And we stop, it goes back. And what if we shoot? And we're still tweening. All right, so let's go back to the blaster controller and we'll say point one. You're going to want to add a wait so it gives the script time to execute. Because if you don't add a wait, it'll just it'll break and exhaust its script execution time. So that's why we add a wait. Okay, so that's a lot more responsive. A little bit more subtle now. I'm also thinking maybe in the next episode, or maybe a few episodes from now, when we aim, we could take away the crosshair altogether. But yeah, I like it. I might do some more customizations to it. But yeah, so far so good. Um, that's pretty much the end of the video, guys. If you like the video, like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff, and I'll catch you guys in the next episode.